Welcome to Startup Wins. Twice a month, we share real stories and smart tips. Subscribe and join the journey.
All right, we have another episode of Startup Wins, and I am blessed today to have not only my good friend Liz Hunt here today, but her amazing partner who I just met recently, Michael Lee, and we're going to have a nice discussion about product. But before we do, let's introduce both Liz and Michael. So Liz, ladies first.
Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Hunt, and I like to joke that I'm a blonde rocket scientist because I have an aerospace engineering degree and interned at NASA. I have a career, I won't say how long, but it has been decades, in product management. I got my start as a software developer, got exposed to user experience design and business strategy along the way, and have worked for with hundreds of clients, and worked on projects like Disney Magic Band, Starbucks mobile app, and the map inside of Google Maps, and have also had a lot of entrepreneurial adventures. So thank you so much for having us on the podcast, Brandon. It's really good to be here.
Well, I am so happy. Liz is actually my first repeat guest, if she doesn't know.
I'm honored.
Well, no, we're honored to have Liz. And that was a wonderful introduction. So we just set up Michael for something to, well, anyway, I won't even try to go with the analogy. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm Liz's foil in a lot of ways, but also we overlap in many. We met sailing yachts, so we both race yachts. Liz is humble. She's also a trained pilot and scuba diver, etc. So we live for fun, and that's how we met each other. So, and I'll get into this a little bit later through this conversation. I'm much more focused on service organizations and building really complex operations. So I have a 20 plus year experience in the healthcare industry and have been a technologist since I was I can't even remember how young, but was programming by the time I was 14, making money. Now I'm dating myself, building websites back in the day when that was the heyday of making money off of those sorts of things as a teenager. So I have a background, undergraduate in health informatics and a master's in health administration. I'm also adjunct at University of Toronto in informatics. So very healthcare focused career. And in doing so, I've done everything from redesign an entire hospital facility to implement electronic medical records in the healthcare industry. So I think I'll leave it at that because I think a lot more will come up, especially around this conversation of product and service and what 8-Bit Spark offers in that regard.
Well, speaking of 8-Bit Spark, this is a new venture that you both have recently jumped on and started. I'm excited to hear more about it. We did have a conversation before. Liz, I'll be honest, I didn't know you were so heavy into the product. And it's exciting to hear because as I build my own venture capital firm and we have our first accelerator, I know product is possibly one of the most important functions of literally creating any startup, right? I mean, it is the essence of a startup. And it sounds like that's what you and Michael are focusing on. Am I correct?
Yes, we consider product spanning both products as well as services because product management can cover both as a discipline. And our intention is really to help our clients innovate. And sometimes innovation is creating something entirely new that's never been seen before. And sometimes it's taking existing pieces and making something more efficient or building something that's better.
Yeah.
In the realm of improvement, I would say. I'm going to be provocative because I always am and say that there is no such thing as pure product or pure service. Everything is both product and service. And that's what 8-Bit Spark can bring to the picture in the context of this conversation. We spent about 8 months looking at our business model and then have refined how we frame it so the website shows more, and we're constantly working on that. It's been pretty hard because we just like to do cool shit. Seriously, like it's like what needs to be done? Do we want to do it? Are they people we want to work with? Are they people that are going to be successful? Most importantly, are they good people that are ethical and upstanding? Because at the end of the day, a lot has to be done on trust in any space, whether startup or otherwise. Nothing gets done without a level of trust to push boundaries and try stuff. There's so many, especially since we didn't mention this, but we're based in Canada. The regulation is so much heavier than it is in the US. And I think Liz can really speak to that because everything is regulated. And so much of the economy is based on tax dollars. So much of the startup economy, if you will, is based on government funding too. So different grants without getting into all the details. And I know there's a lot of that in the US, but I would say that there's a much more limited venture capital market up here as a result of the government grant system, which works very differently, but also as a result of the heavy personal tax burden, which means that donating to a foundation or having your own foundation to do philanthropic things is oftentimes a lot easier than what we see happening in Silicon Valley, et cetera, from a capital standpoint.
Yeah.
So it's a very different environment. And so we really, our expertise is around that innovation edge, as Liz says, and figuring out how to navigate all of that. It's not so easy to do. And so how do you put that on a website? The website needs work constantly. And there's a variety of different projects that we could get into in terms of what we've been up to for the first year and a half or so of the company's existence.
Yeah, but a succinct way of saying what we do is 8-Bit Spark helps companies bring ideas to life.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask, in the drop-down menu in the form on the site, does it say, "Are you cool shit?" And if they don't say yes, do they not get to send you a message?
Well, you should know because you sent us a message out of the blue and off the website, probably, right? So,
unfortunately, I think I'm in too many spaces these days. I don't even remember what I've done a few hours ago, but
right.
everything you and Liz have said so far would be what my fiance would say. 100% is correct. So I completely agree. Well, let me ask though, how did this come about though? I mean, I know you kind of addressed this to a certain degree, but you both are very experienced, and I imagine, I don't know, are there other product specialists, product consultancies? Did you see some huge need in the marketplace where people are not getting the right advice? I mean, I imagine, and you know this, and this is why I'm going to have you guys hopefully take part in our accelerator, is a lot of startup founders just don't know what the hell they're doing, and they think they do, and then they try to do the quote unquote product market fit product again, right? And is that how you guys evaluate it? I'm just curious how this came about.
So when we met on the sailboat, we started joking about some of the electronics and things that are embedded into the sailboat and how bad their user interfaces were and how many ideas we had on how we could do things better. And we would, brainstorm in a joking sort of way, but then also joke about the product market fit in the sense that sailors are notoriously frugal, even bordering on cheap, and they wouldn't pay for any of that stuff. So over the years, we just kept enjoying having these conversations and started thinking about, hey, maybe we might want to collaborate more officially together in the future, and started brainstorming. I think initially our ideas were more focused on like the human growth story, the fact that so many folks in management and leadership roles really get put there without any experience, without any mentorship, without any support or any education, and how both of us in our careers, having reached that point of leadership and developing our own style that we've been told is really effective, wanted to find some way to bring that out. But again, that from a product market fit perspective doesn't have a huge potential for repeatable sales. It's more of a vitamin rather than the painkiller, as they say. And so we just continued to brainstorm from there. And then I'll pass it to Michael so he can talk about the second half.
Sadly, no one will pay for leader education. There's a huge pain point in transitioning someone into a new management role, especially now with the advent of AI. I would say it's very like all companies want people who are senior like us. Well, how are the next senior people going to get trained? That hasn't really been thought of. But when we reflected as a business, we were like, we can't sell this to anybody. No one's going to pay for training for new managers. It's one of those like to do things, but not must have to do things. And so we started ideating further, which is another thing that we believe in, sort of blank sheet and starting to just put ideas down and stress test them. And what we landed on is that innovation is really something that a lot of folks seek, and only certain individuals, though. Actually, I would say most people are just flying by the seat of their pants trying to get through the day. So that's not our customer. That's not who we're targeting or who we would likely work with. We've tried, but it hasn't really panned out. And so I would say in evaluating the market, there's a niche market for folks like us coming in as innovators to help other people who think forward, who are strategic, who want to see the world be different, who want to see it improved, and understand that that requires innovation to get there. So interestingly, unlike traditional business school stuff or startup stuff, we didn't build a persona ahead of time. What we did was we got ourselves out there and just had a whole lot of chats with a whole lot of people. And I know that is part of the gestation of a startup too, but really with a very quick pivot around what would actually get the second conversation. And it turns out that what got the second conversation was more our bios and our backgrounds and how we complement each other and how we overlap with each other's skill set too, as opposed to some UVP mapped out in bullet points and groomed by an AI. And so we very quickly flipped that to the top of the story and then started looking at who would call us back. And then from there, started to figure out persona mapping based on who would call us back. So maybe a bit organic, maybe a bit backwards, maybe not, but that's really been the story of 8-Bit Spark so far. And I know we haven't got into this part yet, but we've worked in everything from healthcare to entertainment at this point, and quite different industries if you think about the relationships, the culture, and the networks.
Yeah, well, I you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to quiz you guys right now, and hopefully you guys won't be too surprised. While I quiz you, I'd love for you guys to think through what you would recommend to startups in this process, because I think your answer may be the advice that startups actually need, but it's kind of an interesting startup. It's a startup that's been around for a long time, and now they pivoted, and now they call themselves X. And so this startup years ago under Ev and Jack's leadership was, this 240 character, I can't remember what the original product requirements
160.
160, right? Now they're 240 or something like that. And it's a fascinating product to do these not just ephemeral, but I would argue these very short messages that can become so powerful, called tweets or whatever the hell what this other guy, I can't remember his name. Was it Elon? I can't remember his name. But anyway, this guy thinks this platform's worth $30 to $50 billion. Now he's pivoting, supposedly he's trying to protect the free speech that we are all supposed to have in this world. But I ironically yesterday just got my account suspended. So no longer can I speak on this platform. And it's not just me. I've seen it to multiple people on the platform, coincidentally, all who know each other. And I recently, spoke up and said, hey, we should get off the platform and use another platform. And so there may be a tiny chance that I bumped heads with some snowflakes that are in the organization, including maybe the head snowflake. And so I'm kind of curious from your guys' perspective. This is an interesting product. I mean, the other thing that you guys don't participate in, I can't wait to maybe, I mean, Liz has participated in Clubhouse years ago, but they have a version of Clubhouse called X Spaces right now. And they don't do anything with the product. It actually gets worse and worse and worse. The technical details of the product, it glitches when you go from Wi-Fi to cellular data. It dies, or you get knocked out of your rooms. The rooms close on their own, and they don't care because they keep on bragging about their 550 million MAUs now that they have, which is true. They have grown, and it was around the product of getting users to create more content for them, right? So that they would get paid. And then they stopped paying these guys and gals. And then now they're fighting, the people are fighting for their, content. What would you do? I know you guys don't have all the insight and details. You don't know how I'll just say it, idiotic their management is. You don't have all that insight, and they didn't pay you to do this, but what would you recommend to them? I mean, we can have kind of a small conversation around what your gut feeling says, because like you said, a lot of senior leaders don't even have education, right? A lot of these people just politic their way up to the top, and they maintain their positions. I mean, Liz and I have had this conversation back in our Google days. Some douches that run the organization, I'll call them out. They're truly douches that run and stay in their jobs because they get paid what, $500,000-$600,000 a year. So they'll do everything they can to keep their jobs and say the right things to their higher ups. So, okay, this isn't supposed to be political, but let's go. So Liz.
What I will say is an overarching thing, and it's not unique to X. It's becoming endemic now across all the industries. It's a concept, a word that was coined by Cory Doctorow. It's Enshittification, and this is the Enshittiocene, as the parlance goes. And the business strategy is deliberately to make the product and the experience worse. And there's a whole life cycle that happens, and it's a way of extracting more capital out of all of the entire users. And so for a lot of these social networking companies, they're dual-sided or triple-sided marketplaces in the sense that it's, you pay for what you get for. The usage is mostly free, although, X and some others have paid tiers. It's all about advertisers, and some of those folks are pay to play, and some of them are getting paid. And so I think it's a deliberate strategy. So I wouldn't even spend, or I'm going to say waste any time trying to advise on how they can make it better, because that is not the current goal. And I could be wrong, but I don't think so based on internet research and other assorted research and conversations that I've been having.
That's fascinating. Michael?
There's been this movement from the early days of Facebook, say, being the first social media platform of any degree of popularity, from a product for you to you being the product. And I think that's well discussed. I don't know how well discussed that is in startup circles, but it's certainly discussed in policy circles, especially as it comes to social media regulation. I know regulation's an evil word in the US in a lot of ways, especially with the current regime, not to get political. But I do think from a health science standpoint, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit momentarily, we missed the boat on regulating social media. There's even some early studies now that say the amplification of social message can't be fixed. It's so endemically built. And this one study I was looking at actually used AI agents to use a social media platform and then watched behind the scenes what happened to the agent. So something you can't really do that well without an AI agent. And so ask yourself, why do you not really get updates from your friends anymore on Facebook? It's all marketplace listings and dubious news and celebrity gossip, right? So, I mean, there's a whole history of news and media around that, going all the way back to William Randolph Hearst. But at the end of the day, you are the product very heavily at this point. So from an 8-bit Spark standpoint, I would say you got to think about that. Now, the most recent trend is that these social media platforms are an intake to train AI. And so I think Elon even moved, yeah, you'll have to fact check me on this, but I do believe he moved X as a cost center under XAI somehow. And so perhaps that's in order to some fancy accounting. But at the end of the day, it's very clear what Meta is doing. It's very clear what X is doing, that the product, quote unquote, that you use or the user interface that you're using in different parts of their ecosystem is simply a vehicle to funnel data from you as the product into an AI, into whatever that company's AI product is to train that AI. Most recently, for instance, and this probably has to go through several more legal proceedings, but I did see that there was finally a settlement around copyright claims relating to books and AI training in the order of 1.5 billion.
Anthropic.
But yeah, exactly. But more to come on that.
But Altman just admitted the dead internet theory and said he's actually worried by how many LLM-driven or bot-driven users there are on social media sites.
Yeah.
So at some point you pollute your, the training data becomes bot generated or so convoluted and infused with, truthiness or
yeah, it's
outright.
called AI slop as an emerging term. But if you think about all this, if you are the product on X and there's all this AI slop happening, your information in every chat and everything that you're, I guess they call them tweets still, anything you're putting in there is invaluable. It's getting more and more valuable. And so, I mean, that was a very long explanation as to what's going on in that market. But as a result, coming in as a product and service specialty company, an innovation company, we would look at all of that and understand how to further engage users in order to get that data into the AI training ecosystem, which is what we would be asked to do. To be honest, I'm not sure I would want to do that kind of work. And there are certain circumstances where that can be helpful. For instance, we have a conversation going with the Canadian Mental Health Association and trying to figure out how to build advocacy for regulation around AI. And that involves also some other partners in the mental health space looking at what responsible AI usage is and even building some product against it to compete with like Facebook companions and things like this, which if there's a market, as we all know from a startup standpoint, then it'll get, if there's a demand, it'll get filled by supply. And so a lot of the public bodies agree that we missed the boat on social media regulation, and AI is even more powerful. So rather than just write a bunch of regulations, can there be a product that's provided that's safe and built with different intentions, leveraging the same technology?
I'd like to make sure we round off this conversation, though, with hopefully a little bit of optimism, I'll be honest, because frankly, I would agree with everything you will say. Again, like she would say 100%, but I don't give up. And that's why I'm obviously not going to give up this account. I'll just find some other way to communicate, and whether it be on Chatter, an alternative platform, or it will be through the VC firm and then buy Twitter away from. That's my plan. I'm just going to buy it for $50 billion, even though it's not even worth it, and actually truly protects, the First Amendment rights. Actually do what Elon had said he was planning on doing in the first place. But I would love to finish off that in more of an idealistic manner. So I'd love for you guys to kind of think about, like, what would you do despite the conditions and maybe even the management and whatever. And then I'd love to pivot to more of a healthcare conversation, because that's obviously, Michael, your background. But I think it's a huge problem in the United States, as Liz, you and I probably could talk about forever. and it's being solved in other countries in some of the most interesting ways. Like, I go to Korea to get my healthcare. I don't stay in the United States. I refuse to use any medical service here because it's a waste of time and waste of money. And Canada's obviously a little bit different, and that might have been part of the reason why, Liz, you migrated up that way. But finishing off this particular one, because social media is so impactful in one way or the other, what are maybe a couple things you think you would fix, and how would you fix it? And maybe throw out some ideas, and maybe the startup could actually even help complement, sell them some product. I don't know. Maybe Chatter needs to be bought by Twitter. I'm just scared that the management would screw Chatter. But any optimistic thoughts, for this problem that's actually growing, as you guys are kind of talking about?
It is, and it's a complex space. If I were given a mandate to help improve the user experience of any of these user networks, I would really focus on the user research first. Try to find out what folks who are using these apps and these networks want, and do a variety of different research techniques. I would partner with researchers because that's never been my specialty. I've worked very closely with them in the past, and there's a lot of different ways that you could make this more of a user-centered or human-centered, which I think is more important, process. And, with the super users of like a audio niche app that you're talking about, there's different use cases there than the Instagram, Facebook things that Michael was referring to earlier. And so, really take the time to understand that domain and the kinds of relationships that can be forged between people in these audio spaces. I experienced it in Clubhouse. I've heard a lot of stories from you, and I've read a lot of things. There's a number of luminaries out there, some famous like Cory Doctorow, others not as famous. My approach is to go out and read a lot of voices, try to find Medium articles or Substacks or posts on the various social media sites, and glean those pearls of wisdom and then test things out. And there are ways that I believe we could incrementally improve this. We could turn things around. And if you could find, most importantly, a way to generate revenue that is in an opposite direction of the enshittification, then you'd be given a lot more mandates. And so it's how can you make, I don't even know what you would coin the word that's the opposite of that, but something optimistic and values oriented, from an internal value, not necessarily monetary value. But if you could monetize the value, you could get the approval and the support that you need from executives and the board to do some really amazing things. And so absolutely, there's room for optimism. And to me, co-creation and focusing on the human-centered component, all the people in the ecosystem who are using a product or service, is the key and the best way of doing that. And launching things from the bottom up is really, really important. So there are alternatives out there, federated tools like Blue Sky, which solve some problems and have their own set of unique problems. But there's a lot of places that innovation could be happening. So a lot of hope.
Good. And when I listen to you, I feel like I wish I would be responding to your texts a little bit faster and hearing from you more, because everything you say just it just reminds me of how thoughtful your answers are, and your thoughts about society, and why Google hired you, why Michael wanted to partner you. So thank you, Liz. How about you, Michael? No, it's seriously some of the best stuff whenever I get to listen to you. Michael, any
Although I am a technology Luddite, as a paradox, I hope I didn't come off as negative, because that's not what my intention was. I think part of it is demonstrating the analysis that 8-Bit Spark would look at in terms of product market fit, to understand what's going on, what the intent of the business and where the market's going, before hopping in and just tweaking a UX UI thing or feature selection or V2, MVP, POC, all that kind of stuff. There is no good or bad technology. Technology can be used for good or for bad. And we can go all the way back to the discovery of nuclear fission and how we got both atomic bombs as well as nuclear reactors out of that. There's no way right now we could power the world without nuclear energy. Yet it could also be used for making a bomb. So the way that I see this AI revolution coming at us is exactly the same. And am a practitioner of AI. I've built it from, I platformed it from the basic levels using Python, Hugging Face, CUDA, all of those things that you need to do in order, all the libraries that you need to do in order to understand how it works. That the AI revolution is interesting because it's turning out at this point in it, the fine tune is much more important than the model selection. And by fine tune, I mean having an expert sit there with, say, 1,000 cases. If we're talking healthcare, say we're trying to detect alcohol in written case notes or sepsis or something like that. Well, it requires a very skilled clinician to sit there and look through 1,000 rows of data and note all the intricacies of, is this a case or is this not a case? All these kind of things. Is the model correct or not? That fine tune is critically important. So when you look at social media, that's part of what's happening with your data. It's because you are human and you're able to help fine tune certain models. What I think is inspiring, though, getting back to the question, Brandon, around what feature or what suggestion would we have for startups, is look at the automation side of things, because more and more tools are coming out for that, whether it's building POCs in Lovable. From an architecture standpoint, it kind of drives me nuts, but it's still something that can get you off the ground pretty quickly. And Meta, for instance, is looking at automating the sales chain or the business development chain, if you will, so that you can write a media advertising campaign using an AI prompt. We'll see how far they get with that. But it does enable these kind of things. And there's a lot of business opportunity either assisting in that ecosystem, say other startups, other small businesses, or being one yourself that brings a certain feature or solves a certain pain point with a product market fit in that automation landscape. So although you hear a lot about AI and robotics and NVIDIA, that's really the outer edge. In a lot of ways, despite having used it in quite a detailed way, I would say, I still see it as just fixing a problem, and maybe this is the startup part of me, fixing a problem that there was already a shitty solution for that technology couldn't fix. So OCR. Remember our scanners, and then we'd scan something and it would take 10 times as long to fix the thing later because there would be random spelling errors or it didn't really work quite well. Well, a lot of computer vision is just that. It's better at that use case. And even dictation software, for instance, back in the day, again, so many corrections you would have to go through and pick through every word and make sure you didn't miss anything. And now a lot of the AI scribe functionality is better speech to text. It's just a dictation software that actually works now. So lost in all this conversation with all these startups making yet another OpenAI API wrapper is the fact that it comes down to what pain point are you actually solving for someone, and either through automation or improvement, there's all these problems that were never properly solved. And now the technology is there to beef them up, improve them, or even enter new spaces that couldn't have been solved with technology before. And it's almost as simple as that. I don't think most of us will be playing with an NVIDIA robot as part of our business anytime soon. There's going to be some, but that's not going to be a realistic scenario. All these other scenarios are.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So let's do this a little pivot because obviously we only have the 1 hour. It would be great to continue on this thread, but I actually have, before we jump into maybe healthcare, if that's okay, I have a question real quick that hopefully you guys can answer pretty easily. You both have been a part of startups. You both have been a part of different organizations that employ startups, and you've both been in, I believe, in larger organizations and as small as individual opportunities. What are some things that you guys have both learned over the years that now you're implementing that you didn't do in the early stages of doing a startup? Like one thing that I can tell already is you methodically chose each other over a long conversation, right? A conversation over and over and over just to make sure there was founder fit, right? Which is, I believe, one of the biggest challenges for a lot of startups is picking the right people who you trust and who finish your sentences, who honestly are going to invest in you both financially and time and everything else. I think this is like one of the biggest things startup founders need to do better. But what else have you both kind of learned through your previous experiences and would love to share with other future startups that you've learned? So again, back to Liz.
Sure. I've learned a lot over the years, and I've always tried to apply what I've learned to the next opportunity that presented itself. For 8-Bit Spark, I would say the biggest one, in addition to reinforcing what you said about making sure that the partnership was very strong and had a very firm foundation, is that making sure that whatever great ideas we came up with would sell, and really focusing in on the business development side first, to the point that Michael in particular is our first person who's out there, the primary face of the organization who's selling, because though I can help in a lot of respects and I love building relationships, selling is not my strong suit. I tried at the last startup and, yes, I had some successes, but it took a lot of work. I didn't enjoy that aspect of it as much as I did all the other aspects. So I chose to partner with somebody who had, amongst other very strong strengths, had that as a primary thing that they were bringing to the partnership. And, you can be the best salesperson. And in fact, we really focus more on the relationship than any traditional sales. But, that's all well and good. You could have that as, you could be magical at that. But if what you're trying to sell doesn't have value, if people don't want it, it doesn't really matter. So, that time that we spent with that, kind of slow ramp up before we incorporated, and taking some of the pressure off ourselves in order to ensure that, it's going to resonate with folks. And it is, we could have more work than we handle. We keep a throttle on it so that we keep the quality high. And most importantly, we keep our health important, our lives outside of work important. We don't want to do, I think they're calling it 996 now. I mean, I slept under my desk at my first jobs, and I don't want to have to do that again. So just to repeat, it's really focusing in on making sure that, what you're coming up with will be purchased by somebody and that it adds value.
Makes sense. Michael?
Yeah, so to be all sales oriented, I'm going to start by that way and say we have a founder's letter format that we use with our clients, with ourselves. That's written non-legalese. It's kind of like vows, our commitment to each other, and running through every scenario. Like, what if somebody dies? These are things no one really wants to think about, right? When there's fervor around starting a new enterprise, a new idea. And so we run through all those kind of scenarios. It's not something that we're making a ton of money off of. Obviously, it's not really like some killer product that we're selling, but it gives us an opportunity to work with you if you're interested in working with us in a way that's very frank and vulnerable, because you have to go through all of these permutations. We spent, as I mentioned, about 8 months getting to know each other from a business context, in the sense of what are our goals with the business, mapping all that out. We did personality testing with each other. We ran through different scenarios. And most of all, we brought Liz's boat across from Vancouver Island to Vancouver. The engine died due to bad fuel. And long story short, the Coast Guard was called, but they sent a tow for us instead. And we had to deal with all that without killing each other. Meanwhile, Liz was pretty seasick, and I said to her, well, you handle the radio comms. I'm just going to make sure that we go in the right direction with the sale right now. And so pretty stressful and a good bonding opportunity, but it's not every business relationship that would survive that kind of thing.
No, I think we need to implement this with every new startup. They all need to get on a boat and then have to hail the Coast Guard. And if they survive, they get to do the startup. If they don't, well, too bad. The world moves on. I've always advocated if I have kids again, I'm just throwing them in the middle of the forest and then seeing if they survive after a week. And if they survive, well, they get to have the rest of their life. So that's how I'm developing grit moving forward, and maybe I'll do it with startup founders as well. So anyway, no, that's awesome. Great thoughts on this. I think as I've hoped for, this podcast gives actionable thoughts to startup founders who are listening. Obviously, they're going to get to listen to you guys a little bit more on the topic of product. Here's your next question about product. Okay, so the United States, in contrast to Canada, in contrast to, I believe, the UK, in contrast to definitely South Korea, sucks as far as the medical system. What's one of the biggest, or maybe two or three of the biggest problems here, and how would you fix it? How would you fix it via a product? Have you had companies come to you already, since you've worked in as a hospital creator? I don't want to call it administrative, but someone who actually developed the whole hospital system, it sounded like. What do you think about the medical system in the United States? You both obviously have experience with it or know about it. So again, we're going to start with Liz, and we'll get to you, Michael.
Well, as a former patient in the United States healthcare system, there are pros and cons. Probably the greatest potential con is that it's a for-profit industry, and everybody from providers to insurance companies are there with the fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit for shareholders, and these shareholders almost always are not the patients. I think one thing that politically and from a policy standpoint that would probably be very hard to do unless you had executive fiat is, find some governmental public version of the healthcare process or at least the insurance. But it's a tricky one. And most of my perspective of it is from a patient, as I said. If I had appendicitis recently as a startup founder in the States, that might have been the end of everything. That might have bankrupted me, right? Luckily, I had appendicitis and appendectomy in Canada, and thank you, Canada. It cost me $0.
Wow.
And, the only way that, I would not have been bankrupt is if I had kept my Google insurance, which meant that I would have remained a Google employee or any other, large company that offers a decent healthcare plan. But as a startup founder, working off of the normal healthcare marketplaces, you'd have quite the hefty copay, and that you might have sunk all your money into your startup and you might not have had enough money to cover that, and then you also need the good business partner who says, oh, okay, you're out of commission for a few weeks. That's okay. I've got it covered. So I answered it maybe not exactly in the way that you were hoping. I think Michael can talk a little bit more from the healthcare industry perspective.
You want a healthcare policy blast on this one? This could be its own podcast, honestly.
Let's do a miniature version of it, sure.
It's not necessarily ministered, but you'll see what I mean when I speak about this. Wait lists are a byproduct of a monosopy in a healthcare system. So single healthcare system in Canada, really, you can get into the fact that provinces all have a slightly different implementation of it. It means you have to wait your turn. And so that in the States, that isn't necessarily the case. The other thing is the personal tax burden, as mentioned, is very high here. So in some ways, you're prepaying for that safety net. There's a misnomer that it's free. So when we get to the US, there's several problems. Actually, the operating cost and the insurance environment, and even the Affordable Care Act, which is a Band-Aid solution on a heavily fragmented insurance landscape. is one of the problems, but in my mind, and I don't know how many of your viewers would have read Thomas Piketty, Capital, etc., where he talks about how the disparity in capital really is driving a lot of disparity in society, essentially. So when we think about that in the context of healthcare in the US, there's a massive overinvestment in capital infrastructure to compete for patients. So whereas in Canada, for instance, at a hospital that's considered, say, quaternary, very complicated patients, there may be a handful of beds that are cardiac monitored. It's expensive equipment to buy. In the US, there are a lot of hospitals where every single bed is, because you come in, they hook you up to a cardiac monitor if you even have the slightest inclination of chest pain, and then they're charging you for it. So that is an expense that may or may not be medically warranted. I'm not a doctor. But at the end of the day, this sort of division of capital amongst the population is totally warped in the US healthcare system, because there's incentive to compete, every hospital having a PET scanner in the area, for instance, and then having to advertise that. So there's a lot of money that's misspent in this kind of way that isn't talked about as much as the insurance landscape in the US. As a result of private businesses, hospitals being private businesses as well, not all of them are, but there's problems such as, I've seen electronic medical record implementations go belly up, and those cost in the billions, and then the entire hospital is bankrupt. So what is really a service for the community becomes problematic, because if you can't operate it due to that kind of insolvency, then you're losing a critical community resource that allows the population to be healthy and productive. A bit of a blast there. I could go on for a long time, but there's some gems in there, I'm hoping, that will allow people to look up other concepts.
No, I appreciate it. And I think the listeners will as well. The one thing I would love to talk about, though, to just at least hit before we get into these three questions that I always ask at the end of the show, is we've obviously talked about two larger issues, social media and hospitals, or the medical or healthcare issues, more on a macro level. Now, you guys with 8-Bit Spark, and this is not a commercial, by the way, 8-Bit Spark did not sponsor today's show or anything like this. These are friends of mine who've started a company. And I'm really curious, because I've never heard of a product consultancy or a product agency or a product, specialist organization. And I'm kind of curious from, let's say, a startup perspective, like, where do you come in? Does it matter is it at any stage of the startup? Is it the startup, the scale up, the enterprise level? Where do you guys feel the most comfortable? Where do your, current clients feel the most comfortable? Just curious. I mean, this is, again, not a sales pitch, because it's more just out of curiosity. How do you, engage? So again, we'll go to Liz, and then Michael once again.
Every situation and every client's need is unique, so we try to bring that that sense of improv, the yes-anding, and the ability to kind of jump in anywhere. So from a product or service lifecycle standpoint, we can jump in at any aspect of that, because as we mentioned earlier in our conversation, innovation could be creating something entirely new, or it could be a series of iterative improvements that's, making things better for everybody in the ecosystem. From a company standpoint, we have worked with the nascent, just have a basic concept, haven't even incorporated yet startups, all the way to large organizations who, are well established, and one could argue no longer startups. And so I think we could jump in anywhere along that spectrum. The offerings that we would have would be different based on all of those. So for a nascent startup, Michael mentioned it before, we do a lot of coaching around, let's solidify your foundation. Have you had these conversations with each other about what your roles are? Is there enough overlap that you can appreciate each other's strengths Is there enough differentiation that everybody has a sphere of excellence where they can shine and bring something unique? Can you handle angel's advocate and devil's advocate situations as it relates to personal lives and business lives? Have you talked through potential exit strategies? And we tend to do that work. It's kind of a pay it forward concept. We've learned a lot, and we hope that after we've had those conversations and they've solidified their business, that they'll want to engage with us. But it also gives us a chance to see if we'll want to engage with them.
Sure.
And then we have another client who, they've had a series of business together, and they had some assets that they wanted to monetize. And that was about as far as they thought it through. And, with them, we took a look at their assets, took a look at the industry, and started brainstorming different applications. And one of the potential avenues that has brought fruition, and they're about to sign a contract, is an app and making use of some assets that they had, and we've helped them throughout that entire life cycle of that offering. And so it really can take the full gamut.
Excellent. Michael?
Getting back to why it's hard on our website to describe what we do, because we also work with government clients, say large enterprises or other not-for-profits. We have a partnership deal with the film festival coming up here, the Vancouver International Film Festival. And so a lot of different types of orgs. It's not just the scrappy startup coming out of an incubator in a university or YCOM or other things like that. It's actually, how I would summarize it is, we want to work with people who want to innovate, but also who will actually go do it. There are too many people in this world that won't do the thing. And so part of our evaluation on where we spend our time is with people who have a track record of actually getting shit done. Because it's just all too easy, whether it's spinning different startups or whether in large government organizations, to just turn the crank, right? So there's different reasons for that, but what we're trying to identify in how we do our work is who are those innovation-ready folks who are going to be successful. Honestly, probably with or without us. That's not a good sales thing to say. But at the end of the day, like-minded people kind of clump together in this regard. And that's what we're looking to do. An interesting facet of the management consulting environment right now is due to AI. A lot of the big consulting firms are trying to switch into this space as well. Essentially, innovation consulting and looking at how do you bring that extra gear of value to something, because AI is going to automate a lot of that, the churn that exists in society and in organizations. And so when you look at that fueled with a tech background that we both have, then you start to see the possibilities, I believe, of what we can help with. So it's interesting because sometimes it's very advanced. Sometimes it's more like our work with the film festival. There were more basic needs there around understanding how to unify technology and analytics, even at a very basic level. But we're not picky about how complex the tech aspect of what we're doing is. We're more looking for what I said around those that will actually get shit done.
So professors, no need to apply. No, just kidding.
Some have, actually. I've got startup ideas.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've had too many professors profess and not getting it done. But anyway, that's
yeah, no, the stereotype, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. That's awesome. These are great thoughts. So we end the show always with the, it used to be 5 questions. I've reduced to 3, but I will ask you one of the legacy questions because it's been very important to me more lately than ever to at least listen to different perspectives. Liz, you gave this answer before, but I'm going to ask you again because this is a couple years later. And that is, you've had some shitty times. You've had some, challenging times. How do you get through those? And we're going to listen to Michael's answer because that will be new today. But what do you do today when you have these hard times?
I would say I'm going to guess one of the things that I've learned since the last time we spoke about this is that sometimes you just have to make the choice, the decision to move forward. And sometimes that choice has to be made on a daily, or on a really bad day, an hourly basis. But making the choice and deciding to try to solve or work around or go under or go over and go through. And when you can, reaching out to your loved ones, and hopefully they're there too.
Great. Thank you, Liz. And to give you a little bit more background, Michael, the reason why I asked this question is because my cousin killed herself in her mid-20s, and my ex's cousin also jumped off the 13th floor of a building in his 20s. And, you know, they had a harder time with this question because obviously they decided to not move forward. A recent friend of mine, she was 35 when she took hers. And, you know, I got to see her pictures, you know, and she was such a funny person. It's just, it's so confusing that she decided to do it at 35, but we didn't know. And honestly, I dedicate this to Elisa, to Shauna, and my ex's cousin, because hopefully for other people who are going through the same struggle, they'll get to listen to what Liz just said. And then Michael, what are your thoughts?
So interesting. This is full circle. I've spent a lot of time actually working in mental health in the healthcare system. And it's what we haven't talked about on this podcast so far is that 8-Bit Spark wants to do impact work. This is one of the areas that we're actively discussing how we might contribute to. So I think it affects all of us. And as much as I'm in a different phase of my career, yet again, having had worked in healthcare for government for a long time, it's still there. And it's about community. So the support comes from community and the caring and the tragedy. So it's all about human connection in relationships and what we do and how we support each other. And it's the most important thing to me. And I'm so grateful to have Liz as my partner, but many others as well, including my wife, my family, and a very strong community network that I can rely on for different types of support that I need.
That's wonderful. Just as a heads up, but what some of the past folks said were doing what you're doing is helping others. Rand Fishkin, one of the more recent godfathers of SEO, said he's been profiled by CNN on his depression, and he said one of the things that he finds solace in is helping others. It gives him some form of value. It makes him feel better, and then he moves on. Others, like a younger guest, Angela Ma, she spoke about going out and just experience what you guys do on the sailboat is experiencing nature and realizing you have this ability to go on a sailboat. You know, other people don't have this chance in life, or we can't, you know, the proverbial, you know, smell the roses. You know, once you smell the roses, then you'll start to realize, shit, other people don't have this opportunity. So life is pretty damn great. You know, I personally have experienced a lot of depression in my life, and I went through these struggles, and I couldn't answer that question that well. And so that was another reason why I've asked this question is for future, hopefully no more bouts. But I personally have figured out that you need to have purpose, kind of related to what I just spoke about. You need to exercise. You just have to be physically, you know, fit. And frankly, you need to have these conversations. You need to be social. Our brains need to be constantly, you know, activated in some form, and these conversations kind of help. And that's why I'll be honest, I spend way too much time on X Spaces. Is I get opportunities to talk to random people, crazy and sometimes intelligent and really beautiful. So thank you for those two answers. This is great. All right, these next three questions are pretty standard, but you know, I think they kind of address some important points. So Liz, who's your hero?
Today I'm going to say Amy Smith. I might have mentioned her last time, I don't recall. She is the lead founding creator of MIT D-Lab. So she has created this amazing network of innovators around the world, and through her organization has hosted hundreds and hundreds of these incredible summits that bring people together, not just to solve problems, but to build lifelong friendships. So a good number of my close friends now are from that experience.
Amazing. And how about you, Michael? Who's your hero?
Can I say Liz? Or is that too schmaltzy?
Whatever you want to say.
She is definitely one of my heroes. I would say, though, if we're thinking about like big influencers, not that Liz isn't one, but I would say Brené Brown. And part of that is because the way that she brings rigor to her research on vulnerability and shame, and the way that she's able to express herself around that. And it's just such a different worldview than what is typically in tech. And so that's where I've always led from, putting my vulnerability on the table first, telling my whole story with my whole heart, which she talks about as well, and being authentic to a fault. So it's done me well so far. I've managed to navigate a lot of very difficult things through life by doing that, even though oftentimes we're told to be more guarded, or that's what's viewed as courageous. And so this is a lot of her mantra, and it's oftentimes what I live by. I think often we get our guard up when we don't feel safe to be vulnerable. But when I push myself to be vulnerable, that's always led to better things.
And just for the audience, who's Brené Brown?
So Brené Brown she is one of the probably most viewed TED Talks out there. And she's a University of Texas, Austin professor and social worker.
Great. The next question is very similar, but people usually answer someone different for some reason. So Liz, who's a good role model, however, beyond maybe even the hero that you could say today we need? I feel like today we need better role models overall, just given the state that we're at.
I wish I could give you one name. Throughout my life, I've never really thought about that as a single individual. Instead, what I do is I look at everyone I interact with, whether it's in person with a real human or virtually with a character, and I try to find elements of what they do or of their values or of their character that resonate with me. Examples that I find meaningful, that I try to incorporate, and also what I call anti-examples, the things that I want to avoid or not do. And then I also try to think about the ways that I can continually improve myself and continually learn. I love learning, and I consider myself a lifelong learner, and for me, that's how I find that.
Great. And Michael?
I'm going to go fictionally here and say Forrest Gump. And the reason for that is just so little judgment, right? Just constantly putting one foot ahead of the other. There's that scene where he just keeps running, right? And obviously not a real person, but I think a sentiment that we all aspire to in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, that movie wouldn't be so popular. So is someone like that always going to meet the president? No. But just the accomplishment coming through lack of judgment as opposed to more judgment. We don't need more judgment in this world, and it's really hard to stay out of that.
Out of the couple dozen people I've asked, no one's answered that question. And Liz, no one's answered the question the way you address it. And it's weird. Most people give very unique answers to both of these questions. So those are lovely answers. Last question is really easy. And I think, Liz, you gave me a tip on Salt Lick, or is that what it's called? The barbecue, or one of you two did. I can't remember. So I did go there. It was pretty damn good.
Okay.
But what's your favorite food? Maybe you can say barbecue if you really want.
That's not my favorite food. That might be Michael's favorite food, but it's
Okay.
not my favorite food.
All right. So tell me what your favorite food is.
My favorite food is breakfast tacos. And Brandon, you have just moved to the heart and soul of the land of breakfast tacos. And you have your homework if you haven't gone to my favorite breakfast taco spots. But as I moved further and further away from Austin, I realized I had to learn how to make my own breakfast tacos. And it took decades of experimentation. But I can proudly say that I can now make very tasty holds their own breakfast tacos at home. And of course, breakfast tacos need spicy salsa, but to me, that's just part of the breakfast taco experience.
I think you said this on the last podcast, by
I
the way.
might have, because this has been a constant in my life. Breakfast tacos and Topo Chico would be my answers to favorite food or beverage for a while now.
Those are great. I got the Topo Chico at least.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you. And Michael, what's your favorite? Is it barbecue?
Specifically smoked beef brisket.
Well, the Salt Lick's smoked beef brisket was very good. Just as an update, it still remains pretty good, and the place was packed. I went to the one to the west side, so yeah, it was a great recommendation. Well, thank you both so much for the time today. I do want to give you guys a chance, though, to let other people who either want to reach out to 8-Bit Spark or want to do more podcast interviews with y'all. So tell us how we get a hold of you. What is your availability? Is this the last podcast interview you'll ever make in your entire life? Just let the audience know your thoughts as far as how to get a hold of you.
So we had a spontaneous choice of name. We were sitting around shooting the shit at my place one day, and I said, what about 8-Bit Spark? And Liz checked the domain registration, and it was available. And so we registered it on the spot, and we're like, we're doing this thing. So I know you're an SEO expert, Brandon. We have had instant SEO on that. Now I'm probably giving away too much.
But that's how you reach us. Our website, 8bitspark.com, and our first names at 8bitspark.com. So Liz at and Michael at.
And the website has a contact us button as well, if you'd like to go that way. So dead easy.
And you both are in LinkedIn as well, I assume. So people can. Yeah, no, Michael, you did give away one of the secrets of SEO. Just pick a unique name that nobody else has, right? And then you'll beat everybody out in the SERP. At least for branding. For unbranding, I'll help you guys out later. So yeah, wonderful to have you both. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. It's so great to be back on another one of your podcasts.
Yeah, we're very grateful to have this opportunity, Brandon.
And thank you again.
If your calendar isn't already set, you're missing out on startup wins. Industry leaders, top advisors, and incredible tips await. Come back for future great episodes and entertaining guests, and come back for more insider strategies and incredible stories from the brightest VCs, founders, and operator experts. We're bringing you the best in the business twice a month. Hit that bell and stay winning with Startup Wins. See you soon.